The Shepherd program began in 1997 through the generous support of Tom and Nancy Shepherd and through really the innovative, visionary educational leadership of Harlan Beckley, the original founder of the program.
I met Tom Shepherd well over a decade ago, and I just absolutely love the man. He was an impressive man. He was humble, he was kind. He never met a person that he didn't want to talk to or engage with. Having said that, he didn't want to just give his money to a program and watch them spend it. He wanted to guide them and nurture them, and he absolutely did that.
Over 20 years ago, my friend Harlan Beckley got a group of us together, about 6 of us or so, to talk about this grand innovative idea he had for a program where we would study together with students, faculty, and staff the causes and consequences of poverty. And we were all on board. We just wanted to know how we could help them. And I started teaching courses that were cross-listed between economics and the Shepherd program from the outset.
And the goal was, from the beginning, to prepare students to address the problems associated with poverty in both their professional lives and their civic lives by offering both coursework and community engagement opportunities.
Well, the Shepherd program from the beginning was important to a lot of students. Slowly, it became an integral part of the students' education, and slowly it became a minor. It was always interdisciplinary. It always involved both coursework and engagement. At first, it was mostly through summer internships, but then not very long after that, we began a lot of engagement in the local community. And then I remember being told that I had more advisees than anybody in the university. Why? Just because all the minors were my advisees.
Like a lot of startups, it did not happen overnight, and it was a series of events, starting with Tom Shepherd, but also with the support of Washington and Lee. A lot of people who become familiar with the program can't help but be enthusiastic about it. It was quite a band of brothers and sisters that ultimately contributed, but they didn't get there overnight, but slowly but surely they did.
In most cases, students initiated new aspects of the Shepherd program. I think it's important that students started these programs because it indicates how excited they were about the possibilities of a sustained education that involved both internships and community engagement and work in the course room that would lead to an impact and transformative impact on their careers and their civic lives.
In a similar way, the classes that are being offered, it's really just a function of the faculty here. So as new faculty come to campus, many of them across a variety of disciplines decide that they want to get active in the poverty program. And so they each have something unique to offer. And the program just kind of evolves.
I think one of the highlights or the great strengths of the Shepherd program is the professional staff and the leadership that program has had over its life course to date.
Being a dear friend of Harlan is the least exclusive club in America. I've been very impressed at the wide, diverse number of people that know and love him from all walks of life, all young and old alike. And Harlan is an inspiration to us all, and it has been a highlight of my last 10 years getting to know him better.
Harlan was a very good leader. He was developing courses, teaching them, generating a culture in the program that was not hierarchical, that was a partnership between faculty, students, and staff. And when he transitioned out and Howard Pickett transitioned in, Howard has just been a fantastic leader following Harlan. I see the large collection of faculty and staff and students that we have in the Shepherd program almost as a little policy school inside Washington and Lee, and it's very invigorating to be part of that.
I think it's just a transformational program. Not only is it good for the students, but I think it's changed the whole landscape of the campus, from the faculty to the administration, to the parents, and to the agencies that they serve, and ultimately the underserved people.
In some ways, it's almost unrecognizable from what it was when I participated 20 years ago. Except clearly the core is still there, right? The core of having that initial intro 101 class is the critical foundation. It makes me proud, and it just sort of amazes me to look at the number of courses, the fact that it's a minor now, that the number of students that participate in the program every year. So I couldn't be happier that it seems to both have more breadth and more depth.
Well, in my wildest dreams, going back 22 years, I would have never imagined that a day would come when the Shepherd program would be the largest minor on our campus. It would just have really been impossible for, I think, all of us except maybe Harlan to have imagined that it could have grown in this kind of way. And today, its footprint is pretty dramatic in the greater Lexington area, as well as across the campus.
I've seen a lot of growth in the Shepherd program, both in kind of the scope and in the depth. Programs like the Bonner program that has evolved from a 2-year kind of service commitment to a really deeply engaging 4-year developmental program in my time. We've seen the number of students academically engaged just explode. We've had new volunteer venture trips, lots of exciting growth in the program.
I've never known a Washington and Lee that was not already positively impacted by Shepherd. I certainly know that there are plenty of folks who come to me and say that Shepherd was one of the reasons that they decided to come to WNL. I certainly know that on graduation day, plenty of students come up to me and say that Shepherd has been their home. I can only imagine that that means it has impacted WNL in a positive way.
I think it's hard to understate how important Shepherd is, right? Because it really is pervasive throughout the entire campus. I think it's really hard for a student to go through their 4 years at WNL without thinking on some level about the complex issues of poverty that we'll learn about in Poverty 101 and through the different experiences.
It gives students a sense of purpose and belonging, but it also binds all of us together on the journey to establishing a more beloved community.
It really helps give students this wonderful education, and it teaches them about really, really important policy matters. And honestly, I think it makes the students better people.
I think it's really important to give students an opportunity to understand how to be involved civically or to be able to direct their career paths, to be able to make a difference in the world. There's so many issues that overlap with poverty studies, and so I really think most students on Washington Lee's campus having this skill set is important.
It's embodying those qualities that we've always said WNL is about. It's about leadership, it's about community, it's about honor. It's a real life example of so many of those things.
The Shepherd program has definitely helped me develop a career because before the Shepherd program, I had some vague notion of wanting to go into social impact as a career, but I didn't really know what that looked like or what options were available to me. And so through all of my experiences with the Shepherd program, it's opened up a lot of different doors and experiences, and it's reaffirmed my commitment to going into something that matters to me.
It helps students get a broader perspective on society and how other factors that they may not have considered earlier impact their own lives and the careers that they choose to pursue. And it taught me an incredible amount about how to approach an issue, not just from the scientific perspective, but to consider those other disciplines too.
In our motto, we say that we're not unmindful of the future, and I think that poverty, because it's one of the most pressing concerns of our time and pretty much of every time, the Shepherd program prepares students to take on leadership roles in those conversations.
To me, it's all about transformational change. Poverty is the social equivalent of cancer. It's everywhere. There's lots of reasons for it, some known, some unknown, and it's a real battle. And what better program to equip our students with this intimate knowledge about poverty and the causes and the ramifications.
I think that we in Shepherd are focusing a lot on vocational discernment and helping our students to think through, okay, I care and I'm passionate about these issues. How does that translate into my future career or my future civic life, or even just the way I'm thoughtful about different situations? And so being able to provide support for that and prepare students to do well in the future is going to be a focus for us as we continue on.
So one of the things that I'm most excited about at this moment, on the 20th anniversary of the Shepherd Program, is the leadership that's provided by Howard and Fran, Wendy, Marissa, Jenny, the people who are part of the staff and others who are involved there, and to envision what can be 10, 15, 20 years from now as that program continues to evolve and serve this university and its students, but even more to serve society as those students take their role as professionals and civic leaders in the community.
There are always going to be young people who want to figure out how to live meaningful lives that help make the world a more just and welcoming place to all. The goals of the program were in 1997 what they are today, which is to bring interdisciplinary coursework and actual hands-on community engagement together to prepare students to address the wicked problems associated with poverty. The overall mission of the organization, like the mission of WNL, hasn't changed. The particular way that we may do that can change.
No program will ever succeed if it rests on its laurels, and that's not what's going to happen with the Shepherd Program.
Hello, good evening. We are getting ready to start our program. Our speaker is running a couple minutes behind, so we wanted to be transparent in that, but our program will go on as follows. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Good evening, and welcome to the Lenfest Center for the Arts. Please take this opportunity to silence all electronic devices. Any audio or video recording or photography during tonight's performance is strictly prohibited. Please take a moment to note the locations of the fire exits. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the show.
Wow. What a powerful way to start the event with student talent. 2019 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Program. My name is Jonte Smith, and I am an active fourth-year graduating senior and a leader here at Washington and Lee University. I serve my campus as president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council and as a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Incorporated.
Good evening. My name is Nuriya Shahadat, and I am a first-year law student. I serve my campus in working with the Office of Inclusion and Engagement, and I am an active student and member of the Black Law Student Association, the Women's Law Student Organization, and the International Student Society. I have also had the honor of serving on the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Planning Committee. Tonight, we will serve as Master and Mistress of Ceremonies, guiding you through this evening's celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In a time-honored tradition, we would also like to open this event by acknowledging the contributions and great strides made by other African American pioneers through the singing of Lift Every Voice and Sing. At this time, we would like to ask the audience members to stand and join in on singing this song. The song will be led by first-year student Lauren McCrae and accompanied by sophomore Levi Lesback. The words can be found on the back cover of your program.
Till now
Wow, another amazing performance. Thank you all for joining and singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. The Washington and Lee University family and larger community has dedicated the last 2 weeks to a series of events which mirrors Dr. King's values and plays a part in keeping his dream alive. We kicked off the week with 4 movements toward freedom, a creative showcase that explored the role that art plays in civic reckoning. Carrying the audience through creative experiences featuring students displaying visual arts, music, and spoken word. We enjoyed the documentary entitled King in the Wilderness.
We also engaged in dialogue on how we as students could use Dr. King's techniques for promoting positive social change more than 50 years later to bring about a more just and beloved community. We were able to enjoy time with the Rockbridge and Lexington communities through annual events such as the Student Association for Black Unity's basketball tournament and the MLK Children's Birthday Party.
On Monday, for some, it was a day off. But for many, we made it a day on in celebration for Dr. King. Whether it was attending the community care parade, the MLK birthday party, one of the authentic Chinoyu Tea Society ceremonies, or the privilege to attend our law school's speakers, Chief Judge Roger Gregory from the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit.
The remaining part of the week-long celebration included our annual MLK Reflection Dinner that allows community members to gather and reflect on the lessons of Dr. King's life and his work. Each year, we invite a range of leaders from both our campus community and our Lexington community to participate and to offer a brief commentary on their view of Dr. King's legacy. The reflection dinner was followed by a Shabbat dinner to honor Dr. King with readings and reflections. And yesterday, Washington and Lee University students, staff, and faculty were able to volunteer throughout Rockbridge County, Lexington, and Roanoke.
First, we want to thank you for joining us to honor the memory of a visionary leader who changed American culture forever. This year's theme is Dr. King's vision, humanity tied in a single garment of destiny. The Washington and Lee University community annually commemorates Dr. King through inspirational speakers that encourage us all to be transformative and progressive in our thoughts and actions, while remembering our intertwined connection of humanity. We welcome many remarkable speakers to help us in the remembrance of his legacy and determination embodied by Dr. Martin Luther King, such as Nikki Giovanni, Michael Eric Dyson, Diane Nash, Julian Bond, Angela Davis, and just last year, his daughter, Bernice King.
Now, I have the pleasure of introducing the president of our university. President Will Dudley became the 27th president of Washington and Lee University on January 1st, 2017. President Dudley came to WNL from Williams College, where he joined the philosophy department in 1998 and served as the provost from 2011 to 2016. A native of Arlington, Virginia, President Dudley received his BA in Mathematics and Philosophy, magna cum laude, from Williams College in 1989, and his MA and PhD degrees in philosophy from Northwestern University. As an undergraduate at Williams College, President Dudley was captain of the water polo team and a member of their swim team. After college, he received a fellowship to study philosophy at Cambridge University, and then worked in energy finance for AES Corporation before pursuing his graduate studies at Northwestern University. President Dudley received a gubernatorial appointment to the Board of Trustees of the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts in 2010, and became a vice chair of that board in 2015. He also served 6 years on the board of the Williamstown Community Chess, including a term as president from 2007 to 2009. He is father of 2 children, Cole and Ella. Please join me in welcoming to the stage President Will Dudley.
Good evening. Thank you to Jonte and Nuria for that welcome and for emceeing tonight's event. Thank you to Runa and Carissa for that beautiful opening tribute dance. And thank you to Lauren and Levi for leading us in that powerful song. We're honored tonight to welcome the Reverend Dr. William Barber to Washington and Lee University. Dr. Barber's speech will provide a fitting climax to our series of events commemorating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As you've just heard, the number and the variety and the quality of the events put on by our community over the past 2 weeks is truly extraordinary. And I want to thank the many people who've done the hard work of planning, organizing, and executing such a meaningful and successful series. Please join me in giving a round of applause. I also want to thank everyone, including all of you, who participated and come out as audience members and participants at so many of these events over the last 2 weeks. Collectively, I think we have all demonstrated a spirit of remembrance and reflection, but most importantly, a spirit of active commitment to continuing to better our campus and our communities now and into the future. I'm very proud to be a member of this community, to join all of you here tonight, and to work together on behalf of Washington and Lee, Lexington, Rockbridge, and beyond. I share your excitement to hear from Dr. Barber. He is the main event tonight, and he will be properly introduced a bit later in the program by Jonte Smith. But first, we're going to let our anticipation build just a little bit longer and enjoy some more outstanding student vocal and dance performances. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you, President Dudley. We appreciate your dynamic leadership and your continued commitment to social justice and inclusion at Washington and Lee University. Next, I am honored to be a part of a student body that is so talented. Our next segment will showcase a musical selection by my fellow students, Ramona Gibson, Sasha Edwards, Joel Simu, Temi Adianju, Andre Gishani, who will be accompanied by Levi Lesbeck, followed by a solo performance by Runa King.
I'm amazed,
for that musical selection and beautiful dance performance. We are all gathered this evening because of the long-standing effects that resulted in one man dedicating his life to the betterment of his community. Dr. King left the world far too early. He was 39 years old when he passed, but for 13 years prior, he became America's drum major for social justice. Many of us truly do not know the man that we celebrate today. As your hosts, we are here to share a little about how Dr. King became the celebrated man that we are here in honor of today. First, you should know that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born Michael King Jr. He entered the world on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was the middle child of Michael King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. Dr. King grew up in the Sweet Auburn neighborhood, then home to some of the most prominent and prosperous African Americans in the country. During his youth, King attended Booker T. Washington High School, where he was said to be a precocious student. He skipped both the 9th and 11th grades and entered Morehouse College in Atlanta, which was the alma mater of both his father and maternal grandfather. There, he studied medicine at law at the age of 15. He went on to receive his undergraduate degree, followed by a second degree in 1948 from Union Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania. While there, he earned a Bachelor of Divinity degree, won a prestigious fellowship, and was elected president of his predominantly white senior class.
King then enrolled in the graduate program at Boston University, completing his coursework in 1953 and earning a doctorate in systematic theology 2 years later. While in Boston, he met Coretta Scott, a young singer from Alabama who was studying at the New England Conservatory of Music. The couple wed in 1953 and settled in Montgomery, Alabama, where King became pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. The King family had been living in Montgomery for less than a year when the highly segregated city became the epicenter of the struggle for civil rights in America and cited by the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education court case decision in 1954. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, then secretary of the local chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on the Montgomery bus and was arrested. Activists coordinated a bus boycott that would continue for 381 days, placing a severe economic constraint on the public transit system and downtown business owners. They chose Martin Luther King Jr. as the protest leader and official spokesman. King, both the Baptist minister and civil rights activist, had an enduring impact on race relations in the United States beginning in 1950s. Among many efforts, King led the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, also known as the SCLC. Through his activism, he played a pivotal role in ending the legal segregation of African American cities in the South and other regions of the nation, as well as the creation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So now, we hope you have enjoyed learning more about Dr. King. And we also hope that the glimpse into his life that we just shared has shed additional light as to why we still honor his legacy today.
We are all gathered here tonight because of the impact that Dr. King's progressive legacy still has on our lives. This evening, I am personally excited to hear from a man who is also a part of America's current civil rights movement.
I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker, my fraternity brother, a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the Reverend Dr. William Barber II. Reverend Dr. William Barber II is president of the Repairers of the Breach, national co-chair of the 2018 Poor People's Campaign, and leads an allegiance of more than 200 progressive organizations both best known as Moral Monday. This coalition has led justice work in North Carolina for a decade and inspired organizing across the nation. The Washington Post called Barber's speech at the 2016 Democratic National Convention the most engaging of many strong ones. Dr. Barber was recognized as one of the international Black achievers by the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, England, and his portrait now hangs in the Black Achievers Wall in the Legacy Gallery. As the architect of Moral Mondays, he stands for a multiracial and multi-faith movement fighting for voting rights, public education, universal health care, environmental protection, the rights of women, labor immigrants, and members of the LGBTQ+ community. In 2013, thousands joined weekly protests at the North Carolina State Legislature. More than 1,000 were arrested in the name of civil disobedience. The Moral Mondays Coalition continues to draw tens of thousands each year. For the past 2 years, Reverend Dr. Barber has led a national organizing tour called The Revival, Time for a Moral Revolution of Values, working alongside Reverend Dr. James Forbes, Reverend Dr. Tracy Blackman, and Sister Simone Campbell to redefine public morality and support state coalitions to address poverty, injustice, and inequality. Reverend Dr. Barber headed the state NAACP from 2006 to 2017 and serves on the NAACP National Board of Directors. He is currently co-chairs with Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Theo Harris, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival which focuses on systemic racism, poverty, and inequality, ecological devastation, war and economy and militarism, and national morality. Reverend Dr. Barber is also a recipient of the 2018 MacArthur's Genius Grant Award. Reverend Dr. Barber graduated from North Carolina Central University, earned a master's degree at Divinity University from Duke University, and a doctorate from Drew University. He is visiting professor of public theology and activism at Union Theological Seminary and the author of Forward Together, A Moral Vision for the Nation and the Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion and Politics, and the Rise of a New Justice Movement. He is a member of the College of Affirming Bishops and lives in Goldsboro, North Carolina, where he has pastored Greenleaf Christian Church for the past 25 years. Next, I ask you to give your attention to the screen where we will show a short video introduction.
We must be honest about the foundations of the political and economic systems we call America. I love America because of her potential, but I know that America will never even get close to being a more perfect nation until we are honest about the politics of rejection.
I want to tell you about some of the leaders who are building the Poor People's Campaign. Callie Greer from Selma, Alabama, who had to bury her daughter, Venus, because she didn't have health care.
I'm here today to share my daughter Venus's story. Venus discovered a small lump in her breast and she wasn't insured. Venus had to be approved for every prescription and every piece of medical equipment that she needed. I'm standing here today in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign because no one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
I'm a second-generation fast food worker, and I've experienced the cycle of poverty firsthand. Growing up, I watched my mother endure long hours of back-breaking labor, doing everything she could to feed me and my sisters. My employer barely pays me enough to pay rent and utilities, let alone with the medical expenses with my mother.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines.
I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. My only chance of going to college was joining the Army.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
But when I lost my housing, healthcare, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
Hi, my name is Pamela Roach. I'm from Lowndes County, Alabama, and I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids. And I got raw sewage. I don't have no money on power. And I have to travel back and forth to Birmingham to take my daughter with the CPAP machine. Don't have a car and don't have no way to take her.
This is the largest encampment in Aberdeen. There's about 1,000 people in a town of 16,000 who are homeless.
In my community, we were all shut off in a day because none of us could afford our water bills. In the past, my family wasn't able to afford electricity in the winter. It was very hard on all of us.
This wall, this is sin of the highest order.
When there are 38 million poor children, when 60% of African Americans are poor, when 65% of Latinx are poor, when 40% of Asians are poor, when there are 67 million poor white people, we must say, this is not right.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
We lift our voices for justice. We put our bodies on the line for mercy. And together we will proclaim liberty throughout the land for the enslaved, for the poor, and for us all.
Follow that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock in the middle, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. A wave, and the historians tell us it's never happened before.
Our communities, Muslim communities, who have joined the Poor People's Campaign, you can count on us.
Our democracy is in trouble.
Our democracy is in trouble.
And we come to demand.
Second warning.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard. No one is listening. We write letters, we make calls. No one is listening. So we gotta find a way to make ourselves heard.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court of this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society.
Everybody say, "Ah!"
I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighter, and he taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
We demand the right to vote. Before we need to cease and desist immediately, or you'll be arrested.
There will be a movement that will break through the con. and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
And without further ado, please welcome the Reverend Dr. William Barber II.
Hello, everybody. My goodness, would you say with me, forward together? Not one step back. It is good to be here with you. We thank God for God's mercy and grace to be here with you tonight. I want to thank all that have had anything to do with my being here, to bring the movement here. I want you to know I'm not here to celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, because I don't really believe in celebrating prophets. I believe in joining them. I believe that what you do when a prophet of justice dies or is killed, you go to the place where they failed, you reach down in the blood, pick up the baton, and carry it the next mile of the way. So we can commemorate or we can reimagine, but many people want us to remember him in the past, but the Bible says in Matthew 23, there are those who love the tombs of the prophets, but they do not love the prophets when they are alive. And so I'm glad to be here. Those of you who know that we still need to be engaged, say that to the president here and all of the students. In fact, I've come to recruit you to this movement, the Poor People's Campaign, National Call for Moral Revival. We're now in 40 states plus here in Virginia. And there is a number, 90975. If you would take that number, write it down, or type it in your phone. It's all right, take your phones out, 90975, 909. Don't act like you all don't do Snapchat and tweet and all that. 90975. Somebody say amen when you get it. 90975. Text moral. Text the word moral to 90975. Is President Dudley? There he is. I'm ready to see him. Make sure I know where the president's sitting. Let's give honor to our president tonight. We thank God for him tonight. And mostly for all of you and these grand students. I've been on the road. I'm a little teary these days. I just eulogized my baby brother a couple of weeks ago. He died after a 30-day battle with pancreatic cancer. And been traveling across the country. Was at church this morning and drove about 4.5 hours to be here. But I thank you because your love and being in community helps us when we're hurting. One of the worst places you can be when you're hurting is isolated, all by yourself. So I had to be here with you on tonight. There is a scripture that was one of Dr. King's favorite texts. It's in Hebrews. I'm a preacher. I tell people I'm a theologically evangelical, liberal, conservative, charismatic, Pentecostal biblicist. In other words, I know Jesus for myself. And there is a scripture in the book of Hebrews chapter 10 that says, verse 39, we do not belong to those who shrink back unto destruction, but to those who have faith and persevere until the saving of the soul. It is said that the night that Dr. King's house was blown up in Montgomery, and the night that his good friend's house, the president of the NAACP, E.D. Nixon's house, was blown up, And E.D. Nixon was not a nonviolent person. He'd been in the service. And he asked Dr. King, what are we going to do now? People are burning up our homes. And it is said in some lore within the civil rights movement that Dr. King said, we are not of those who shrink back unto destruction, but we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You know, before I say anything further, it's a miracle that we're here at Washington Lee University. Washington Lee University accepted its first African American student in the 1700s and didn't accept another one until the 1960s. It was John Chavis, who became a Presbyterian minister, who ended up teaching black and white students, white during the day, black at night. The park is named after him in Raleigh. His grandson is Ben Chavis, who was former president of the NAACP and was a part of the Wilmington 10, a young man who was locked up or charged for 40 years for something he did not do, he and the Wilmington 10. And it was only in the 150 years of the Emancipation Proclamation that they finally had those charges removed. Washington Lee University. It was here that when Robert E. Lee, after surrendering the Confederacy Army, was assigned to be president of this university. Washington Lee University. It's a miracle that we're here together tonight, black and white, and young and old, and gay and straight, and probably Latino, Asian. Because during that period of time from 1865 to 1870, a chapter of the Ku Klux Klan was formed on this campus. And their goal was not just to terrorize black people, but to terrorize white people who would work with black people, which was the original reason the Klan was founded, not to terrorize black people. But the original founding of the Klan was to terrorize white people who wanted to build fusion coalitions, poor white people that would build fusion coalitions with black people. It's a miracle that we are here. There was a time this university fought even commemorating Dr. King's legacy. It is a miracle that we are here, but we are. And since we are, we have to own the past, but we also have to live in the present and see toward the future. If I'm not mistaken, your motto has something to say about not unmindful of the future. Am I right, Mr. President? Dr. King was always thinking about that. In 1965, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march across the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge, Dr. King probably preached his most lengthy but most powerful sermon in public on the steps of the Alabama State House under the threat of assassination. They had told him, if you get to Montgomery, we're going to kill you. And he did a speech entitled, We're on the Move Now. Very few people read it because for some reason, people think Dr. King didn't say anything after I Have a Dream. And they don't even read all that he said before. He even said, I Have a Dream was like, in the black church, they call that the hoop. That's like the closing. He did that, I Have a Dream, a lot of places, but it's what he said before that. But in 1965, standing on the steps of the Alabama State House, he said, listen, he said, the leaders of this movement, and he was talking about the movement in the 1800s, between 1865 and the 1880s, called the Reconstruction Movement, that brought white and black people together, that changed the South fundamentally between 1865 and the 1880s. I don't know if you know that, but in the South, every state house in the South between 1865 and 1880 was led by either a majority black legislature or majority black-white fusion legislature. Yeah, in the 1800s. And those state legislatures, like in North Carolina and Virginia, they passed laws to open up education for everybody and equal protection for everybody. They actually worked together in the South against those who only wanted to stay stuck in the racism of the past. Right. And in 1877, a president got selected, not elected. He lost the popular vote. I don't know why y'all laughing like this sounds familiar. I say 1877. He lost the popular vote. He was selected by the Electoral College, and he promised people that if he was selected, he would roll back the civil rights laws. He would give them the Supreme Court, and he would deregulate the South and pull out all the protections that kept racist entities from undermining the relationship and the unity of black and white people. 1877, I'm just saying. And Dr. King said, listen, this is in March of 1965. The leaders of this movement began awakening the poor white masses and the former Negro slaves to the fact that they were being fleeced by the racist emerging Bourbon interests. And not only that, they began uniting the Negro and the white masses into a voting bloc that threatened to drive the Bourbon interests from the command posts of political powers in the South. When this threat was real, the Southern racist white aristocracy began to separate poor blacks and poor whites from each other. I want you to follow me here, Dr. King said, because it's very important that you see the roots of racism and the denial of the right to vote. Through the control of mass media, they revived the doctrine of white supremacy that saturated the thinking of poor white masses with it, thus clouding their mind with the real issues. They deliberately split them, and they crippled and destroyed the populist movement of black and white people working together in the 19th century. So it may be said of slavery era that the white man took the world and gave the Negro Jesus. Then it may be said of the Reconstruction era that the Southern aristocracy took the world and gave the poor white man Jim Crow. He gave him Jim Crow, and when his wrinkled stomach cried out for the food that his empty pockets could not provide, so that he would not join with black people and build political power, he was fed Jim Crow, a psychological bird that told him no matter how bad off he was, at least he was a white man. And when his undernourished children cried out for the necessities that his low wages could not provide, the aristocracy showed him Jim Crow and blamed black folk rather than showing him the truth, that it was the greed of the aristocracy. And Jim Crow became the last outpost of psychological oblivion. This is what has happened in America. And what happens in America, this is Dr. King, whenever the Negro and the poor white masses of the South threaten to unite and build a great society, somebody uses division to keep them from seeing one another. Now, in his last sermon 3 years later, in April, on the evening before he was shot down outside of the Lorraine Motel, Dr. King said this: after declaring that America was sick, 2 weeks earlier he had said America must be born again. On April 3rd, he said America was sick, and the sermon he sent that he was going to preach that Sunday was entitled, America Will Go to Hell If She Doesn't Change. Listen what he said the night before he died. Now, we often think, I've been to the mountaintop. That was the hoop. Dr. King often used I've been to the mountaintop. It just had more effect that night because the next day he was shot. But But he had often said, I've been to the mountaintop, I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. He was quoting out of Exodus, Moses. But listen what he said in the sermon. Now let me say as I move to my conclusion that we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point. We've got to see it through. And when we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be concerned about your brother, because we either go up together or we go down together. And he was in Memphis working with garbage collectors. But what he was also doing was organizing the Poor People's Campaign, bringing white people from the mountains of Appalachia together with black people from the Deep South and reviving fusion coalitions. And the next day, he was shot. But before he left us, he said nothing would be more tragic than for us to stop now. That's what I want to talk about, because King didn't live to see another 24 hours of that year, but 50 years later, in America, we find ourselves in a similar collective crisis. Extremists and their enablers, not just one person, extremists and their enablers have worked to hijack the political landscape for a season. Now, they've connected with a narcissistic charlatan and a racist to steal elections through voter suppression and racialized gerrymandering. And they used an antiquated electoral college to do it because 4 million people voted against, more people voted against the current president than voted for. 4 million. And he only became president because of 80,000 votes in 3 states. One of those states, Wisconsin, he won by 30,000 votes, but 250,000 votes were suppressed. According to Ari Berman's book, Give Us the Ballot. The election of Trump is a symptom. I don't want to talk so much about him as a person, because what I want to talk about is this symptom. It is a symptom that says in the 21st century, after this country has, the 400th year after the first slaves were brought here, that you can lead, you can run for president and lead with racism, lead with xenophobia, tell people you're going to take their health care, lie in ways that if any other president had done it, especially Obama, they would already be gone. You can do that and 60 million people will support you. "50 years after Dr. King said nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now, we need to hear that. 100 million people stayed home in 2016 that were eligible to vote. 100 million. And we have now a person and enablers, and the stated goal, they told us this on TV, elect me and we will deconstruct the federal government and deconstruct the gains and the progress that were won 50 years ago from the White House to the Congress to state legislatures. We are seeing right in front of our faces the denial of our most fundamental constitutional values. You know what they are, right? Moral constitutional values. One of them is ensuring domestic tranquility. Instead, we are seeing the ensuring of domestic division. Establishing justice. Instead, what we are seeing is the establishment of injustice. Providing for the common defense. Instead, what we are seeing, the providing of the defense for a few. Promoting the general welfare. Yes, welfare is a constitutional word. It is not a bad word. And yet we are seeing the promoting not of the general welfare, but of the welfare of the select. And in the face of this basic fundamental subversion of our democracy, we would do well to remember what Dr. King said. Either we go up together or we go down together. And those of us, regardless of color, creed, sexuality, those of us who are committed to love, truth, and justice and nonviolence must declare nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. First of all, nothing would be more tragic than to turn back now because of the continuing reality of systemic racism. Now, notice, it's just all right, I love babies. It's all right. Notice I didn't just say racism, because too many people think racism is being rude to somebody, or a word, or you know, saying something negative about somebody's physical features. Well, that's words, but that's not what Dr. King was talking about when he talked about racism. He was talking about systemic racism, systems of racism, where the person doing the racist things may never call you the N-word, where the person doing the racist thing might even be black. Because you can be black and still support white nationalism. Because white nationalism is about an agenda, a political agenda. It is not merely about words. Let me see if I can make this clear. Nothing would be more tragic, students, than for us to turn back now when 50 years after the Voting Rights Act was passed, August 6, 1965, we have less voting rights today than we did then because the Voting Rights Act was gutted on June 25, 2013. Section 5 that says states like Virginia and North Carolina and other southern states that had a history of voter suppression had to have their rules approved before they could put them in place because they could not resist passing suppressive policies over the last 50 years. And in 2013, before there was the current president was even thought about, the Supreme Court ruled that things were okay. And we didn't need pre-clearance. Well, since that time, 26 states have passed voter suppression laws. They didn't have to go through pre-clearance. 23 of the nation's poorest states have passed voter suppression laws, which means we have people getting elected. I don't know what Russia did, but we know what voter suppression has done. We have people getting elected to unconstitutionally constituted bodies because of voter suppression, racialized gerrymandering, photo IDs, blocking same-day registration and early voting. And you know what is strange? Is that the very persons that get elected by using racialized voter suppression, once they get elected, they pass policies that hurt mostly white people. If I had my map up, I'd show you all that. That's why y'all saw all those white and black people working together in the Poor People's Campaign, the 21st century. They pass policies, they get elected using racialized voter suppression. Once they get in office, they vote against health care, vote against living wages, and all of those things hurt mostly white people. Dr. King was right when he said that in 1965 in Montgomery, there is a class that uses division, seeks to divide black and white poor people and working class people, because if black and white and brown poor people ever come together and form a voting bloc, extremists cannot win in the South or anywhere else. Here we are talking about systemic racism. Here we are in America in the 21st century, and we had a president call African nations S-hole countries. Now, when I came up on the yard tonight, a brother from Sierra Leone was wearing a Washington Lee police uniform. He didn't look like shit. And I don't think y'all let that walk around in your uniforms. But we have that happening in our midst. Racism, systemic racism. Taking children from their mothers on the border, that's systemic racism. Children dying. And talking about putting up walls We've been building walls for 400 years in America. Isn't it time to stop building walls? Walls of racism, walls of classism, walls of sexism, walls against gay people. Putting a wall up, wanting to put a wall up, and then use DACA and health care for young people as a bargaining chip for walls. It's like, we'll give you voting rights, but you got to accept grandfather clauses and poll taxes. There's nothing in it. It's wrong. In fact of the matter, did you know that really people didn't cross the border? We crossed the border. First of all of us are immigrants or slave heritage, unless you were a Navajo, and a Cherokee, or an Apache, or a Blackfoot. You're an immigrant. So how do immigrants hate other immigrants? That's the first question. Second question is, how do you want to put laws in place now for immigrants that if they were in place in the 1920s, your own great-grandmama wouldn't have been able to come here? And then thirdly, you do realize that Texas was Mexico, and New Mexico was New Mexico. And the only reason Texas pulled out of Mexico was when Mexico decided to be anti-slavery. And Texas wanted to keep its slaves. So they didn't cross the border. Really, when they want to come here, they're not coming to our country. They're coming to the land we stole from them that was theirs in the first place. And that's systemic racism. And because it's real, nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. But there's another reason nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now, and that is because the inequality in our nation has reached extremes we have not seen since the Gilded Ages in the early 1900s. Right now, the wealthiest Americans get a massive tax break, and there are 15 million more poor Americans today than there were in 1968. 140 million poor and low-income Americans today. 140 million. And much of that is because the goals and the programs of the war on poverty were abandoned. And we decided to treat corporations like people and people like things, and give corporations welfare, and tell poor people to go out and find jobs and then not even pay them a living wage so that they could live. In 2017 and 18, listen, 37 million people, even with the Affordable Care Act, do not have health care. There are 25 of the wealthiest countries in the world. We are one of them, and we're the only of the 25 that doesn't offer some form of universal health care, and we're the wealthiest of all 25. And I'm not talking about 25 communist countries either. I'm talking about other democracies. Right now, there are 39 million poor children in America. 52% of all the children in America are poor. 43.5% of all the people in America are poor and low wealth. 21 million elders, that's 41%. 26 million black people are poor, that's 60% of black people are poor or low wealth. But watch this, 35% of white people are poor, but that's 66 million people. There are 40 million more poor and working poor white people than there are black people that are poor. Black people have the largest in terms of the percentage of their race, but in raw numbers. And this is happening while we are the wealthiest country in the world. This is happening while 400 of the wealthiest families make $97,000 an hour, and we lock people up who want 15 in a union. This is happening while we give $2 trillion of tax cuts to the wealthy, and the very entitlement programs that in the 1930s and 40s and 50s helped uplift white people are now being cut because those programs have been racialized, so that when people hear welfare, they hear heating program, they think black and brown. And the reality is the majority of the people that get hurt in raw numbers are poor white. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back. Now, right here in Virginia, you know, somebody almost got a little upset because they thought I wasn't going to make it, but we got here. But I said, I wanted to tell Mrs. Mother, there's some stuff to really get upset about. Let me tell you what you ought to get upset about. You ought to get upset about the fact that 43% of the people in Virginia are poor and low wealth. That's 3.5 million residents. That's 51% of all the children in Virginia are poor and low wealth. 44% of all the women, 1.9 million. 57% of all people of color, that's 1.7 million. And 35% of white people, that's 1.8 million. There are more poor white people in Virginia than there are black or brown. And from 1979 to 2012, the income of the top 1% in Virginia grew by 199%, while the income of the bottom 99% only grew by 25%. In Virginia, 813,000 people today are uninsured. There's 6,000 homeless people in Virginia. And in Virginia, if you work at the state minimum wage, it takes you 131 hours of work per week to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. You have to work 4 40-hour-a-week jobs a week working at minimum wage. And 744,000 people in this state get food stamps, while there are people in Washington, D.C. talking about cutting food stamps, and we're willing to shut down the government over a crazy wall. And not only did government workers hurt, but the people who need the services are hurting. I'm telling you, nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. Nothing would be more tragic when it comes to the things, the ecological devastation. Do you know 4 million people get up every morning and they can buy unleaded gas and can't buy unleaded water? This is what Dr. King was focused on when he left us. Do you know we spend 54 cents of every dollar, every discretionary dollar on the military? I know this is a military institution, has some history, but we can blow the world up now about 100 times. Seems like once is enough, 2 to make the cleanup. That's enough. If you're interested in blowing the world up. The majority of the people that are dying in our military now are not dying on the battlefield, but from suicide. We could cut our military budget properly, still have the strongest, most powerful military in the world, and provide health care, and provide living wages for all of our citizens. But something is wrong with the moral center. Dr. King said it. That's why when before he died, he said there were 3 great evils: racism, poverty, and militarism. We are declaring today that there are 5 great evils: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and then this last one, the false moral narrative of religious nationalism, or Christian nationalism. That's another reason we can't turn back now. Because we got this so-called religious nationalism or Christian nationalism that literally has become apologists for the enablers of injustice. I mean, they literally teach this. They literally try to say this is Christian. That to be Christian or to be God-fearing, all you got to care about is being against gay people, against a woman's right to choose, for guns, for tax cuts, and for prayer in the school. Ain't none of that in the Bible. Now remember who you talk to. I'm a conservative. I grew up, and before I could eat a biscuit, I had to quote a scripture, and it couldn't be Jesus wept. So don't mess with me about the Bible now. If I know anything, I know the Bible. Huh? There may be about 4 scriptures in the Bible against what we call the gay, and we misinterpret all of them, and none of those trump the scripture, you must love your neighbor as yourself. Come on here, somebody. There are over 2,000 scriptures in the Bible that talk about how we should treat the poor, though, and how we should treat women and children and the immigrant and the least of these. And if you cut all of those scriptures out of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, the Bible literally falls apart. And yet we have people in the name of God going up and praying, P-R-A-Y-I-N-G, for a president, and not saying a word about him praying, P-R-E-Y-I-N-G, on the very people that the scriptures tell us we ought to be concerned about. I mean, you know, scriptures like Isaiah 10, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children their prey. Scriptures like Ezekiel 22, where it says, your leaders have become like rabies-infested wolves, devouring the people through extortion, through mistreatment toward the children and the women and the immigrant. Or like Jesus said, woe unto those who tithe, who engage in all kind of religiosity, but you leave undone the weightier matters of the law, which are justice and love and faithfulness. Or Jesus, when he said to the nations, not to individuals about individual charity, but to the nation, when I was hungry, nation, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you care about me? When I was in prison, did you visit me? When I was a stranger, did you welcome me in? Because inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of thee, you have done it unto me. We have far too many politicians that love to put their hands on the Bible and don't even know what's in it. We have far too many pulpits that are preaching their own version of some kind of anity, a mirror anity, their anity, but it sure ain't Christianity, because it's not rooted in the love and the grace and the justice and the truth and the mercy of God. And Dr. King dared to take that on. You remember in his day, he got put out of his own denomination because his own denomination of black ministers said, calm down, man. He had to write from jail to ministers that told him, slow down, wait, stop being an extremist. And Dr. King said, wasn't Jesus an extremist? Wasn't Amos an extreme? Isn't our Constitution extreme when it declares we the people? Isn't our Constitution extreme when it believes that we can have liberty and justice for all? And so nothing, my friends, would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. As James Baldwin said, we made this world we're living in, and we must make it over. And so in this moment that you're seeing, I know sometimes your head is hurting. The TV every day, it seems like something, but something else is going on way bigger than Trump. Trump is a symptom. Neil Painter at Princeton says that Trump is the iconography of a too often repeated reality in the American project. We go forward, and then there's a radical push to go backwards. It's happened. We've had racists in the pulpit before. Woodrow Wilson was one of them. Former president of Princeton, governor of New Jersey. He would talk nice to you, but his policies were racist. He rolled back the desegregation of the federal government. He played Birth of a Nation. Many people don't know the statue in Charlottesville, it wasn't raised to pay tribute to the Civil War. No, because even General Lee, Robert E. Lee, didn't want that done. Robert E. Lee said, no, we lost. You don't raise no statue. You would get hurt in the 1800s trying to raise a statue. Those statues were raised after Reconstruction had been destroyed, and after Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. They were raised between 1890s and the 1920s to pay homage to the return of white supremacy that was most especially marked by the election of Woodrow Wilson. That statue was commissioned in 1919. Woodrow Wilson was raised in 1919. Woodrow Wilson was elected in 1914. And when he played Birth of a Nation in the Oval Office, 100 years before Bannon, Birth of a Nation was the movie that celebrated the Klan and celebrated the violence against black people and declared that black and white people who had worked together in the South were the cause of the fall of the nation, and that the Klan and the red shirts and those who wanted to go back to white supremacy were the heroes. And Woodrow Wilson played that in the White House long before Donald Trump was ever there. Don't get it twisted. In this moment, it is not just about one person. It's about whether we as a people can reconstruct the heart of our democracy. Right now, we are being asked to remember what Dr. King said also in '68. The poor, both white and Negro, live in an cruelly unjust society. He said they must organize a revolution against injustice, not against the lives of their fellow citizens, but against the structures which the society is refusing to deal with. He said the people who are impacted must rise together and organize together a moral movement that will break oppression and poverty and racism. This was the voice of Dr. King as the bullet rang out and severed his jaw and severed his spine. This is what he was doing. This is where he was, working with poor whites and poor blacks. He believed in the possibility. And my friends, it is actually a disservice to merely remember what he did. The only way we can honor him and all of those who stood with him is to pick up the baton now and carry it forward. We got too much poverty in America, too much systemic racism, too much ecological devastation, too much war economy, and too much using religion as an instrument of hate. And so we must, a group of us, all over the country I've been traveling, we must declare before God and this nation that when it comes to our rights ordained by God and guaranteed by the Constitution, we will never lose faith. We will never give up on this democracy. And I've been all over. I've been in Washington State in homeless camps where 1,000 white millennials live homeless in Aberdeen, Washington, and they're joining the movement. I've been down in Alabama with Callie Greer, whose baby died in her arm, a child, because Alabama chose not to expand Obamacare. They racialized it by calling it Obamacare. That's not even the name. You don't call Social Security Roosevelt Security. And Alabama refused to expand health care, claiming it was going to help mostly lazy, which is a code word for black and brown, and it's hurting mostly white people. But this black woman's daughter died, and she's organizing. I've been down to El Paso, Texas, and walked in the water of the Rio Grande River with a mother whose children and her husband were snatched away from her 16 years ago because of a mistake on a form. And the Border Patrol was so moved by her tears that they said, well, we can't officially do it, but we'll turn you back and we'll get our back and we'll give you time. And we walked into the middle of that river, and they came from the Mexico side, and we met in the middle. She's joining the movement. I've been out in West Virginia with white women who are college educated and working and poor in the mountains. And they've said to me, Reverend Barber, up in these mountains, you don't kick people when they're down. That's our motto in the mountains. Don't care what color they are. That's something you don't do. And they're joining the movement. We've been in the Bronx. We've been in California. We've been in Texas. We've been in Kansas. I've watched cattle ranchers, poor single-family cattle ranchers joining up with black youth and Latino youth from the city, understanding that if you are poor and you're white, and you're poor and you're black, or you're poor and you're Latino, or you're poor and you're Asian, or you're poor and you're Native, and you can't pay your light bill, and your lights are turned off, we all black in the dark, baby. It is our time to remember. It's all right to remember those of the past, but Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, Dorothy Day, Rabbi Heschel, John Chavis, James Reed, Martin Luther King Jr., they are not coming back. It's our time now. They can't come back. No matter how much we would declare we wish they, it is not enough to look back. We must stand on their shoulders, and we must begin to demand and say nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we have a fully restored Voting Rights Act, an automatic voter registration at 18, and early voting in every state, and election day as a holiday. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we have just immigration reform that we could fix in one day if it wasn't so much racism against Mexican people, and other brown people who desire to come here. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we have tribal recognition for all of our Native American brothers and sisters and Alaskan people. Nothing would be more tragic until we end the mass incarceration and the new Jim Crow. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we have a federal and state living wages and a right for all workers to join unions, and equal pay for equal work, and social uplift programs for the poor, and equity and diversity in education, and free tuition to colleges and universities so that students don't come out of school more in debt than they have to pay that debt longer than they were in school. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now until we have universal single-payer health care for all people, like Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican, wanted in 1912. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now until we have fair and decent housing. If the president can live in decent public housing, then poor people ought to have decent public housing. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we repeal the 2017 federal tax law that took $2.3 trillion from the backs of poor and working people. More wealth was transferred from poor working people to the wealthy in that bill than was transferred from the slaves to the slave owners. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we have fully funded public water and sanitation and infrastructure and clean renewable energy and a ban on fracking and mountaintop removal so my brothers and sisters in West Virginia and Tennessee and Virginia are not dying. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back until we stop that pipeline that is trying to run through Union right here in Virginia. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now until we stop the privatization of our military budget and we stop putting more money in bombs than we do in bread and health care. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now until we get a ban on assault rifles. And these things that I'm talking about, if there's any media here, I'm not on the left, I'm not on the right. We're not talking about the left and the right. We're talking about the moral center. What is going to be necessary for this democracy to thrive? You cannot have 43.3%, 5% of your democracy living in poverty and low wealth and think that democracy will ultimately survive. The question now is not will the Democratic Party survive or the Republican Party survive, but will America survive? You cannot have an America where you elect people and they get 4 million less votes and they occupy the office. You cannot have an America where people can run openly against people in racist ways and somehow they're able to slip in through an antiquated electoral college that was designed through the 3/5 compromise, that was designed to count black people as 3/5 of a person because the North wanted them counted for taxes and the South wanted them counted for representation, and so they split down the middle. And the last time I checked, God didn't make no 3/5 persons. And anything connected to that compromise is wrong. And so, my brothers and sisters, these are tough times, but it's your time. That's why you're here. That's why you're here at Washington Lee with all of its history, and yet you're here, black and white. That's why some of you still around, got gray hair. God needs one more round out of you. That's why even though last year y'all had Klan flyers, tonight we in here talking about building a movement. That's why. Look around this room, black and white together and brown together and old together and what. Now, in fact, no matter, I need some folk to come up here with me. I need somebody that doesn't mind saying I'm white to come up here, I'm black, I'm Latino, I'm gay, I'm straight. Come on up here. I need somebody that's not afraid. I need somebody, just come up here and stand beside me a little bit. Doesn't mind owning who you are. I need somebody that's old and white. You remember, and you didn't like it then, you don't like it now. I need somebody that's old and black. You didn't like it then, you don't like it now. I need somebody that's young. young. I need female. Come on, somebody, some male. Come on and stand up here. I need somebody that's got a little money, but you know that just because you have some money, you ought to still care about poor folk. Come on, and just stand all around me. Stand all around me. Because we together, come on up here. That's right. Come on. Get close to me. Get close to me. We must decide. That's a good number. All those that are coming. That's it. That's a good number. Come on. We must decide. Fill in this hole right here. I feel kind of a little airish right here. Come on. Somebody that's got a little handicap. We got to carry everybody. We must decide if we're going to follow Dr. King. Just like he did. He stood up. They told him, if you go to Memphis, we're going to kill you. He went there anywhere. And we've got to decide. One election can't turn us back. One loudmouth can't turn us back. George Wallace couldn't turn us back. Bull Connor didn't turn us back. Our faith might get bruised and battered, but our hope for this nation to live out what is said in the Constitution, we are going to fight for it. And I know the power of getting together. I know it biblically because when Moses and his people and that rod came together, Pharaoh came down and the Red Sea opened up. Do I have a witness here? Amen. Can I just preach like a little country preacher for a minute? Yeah. When Esther and her uncle Mordecai came together, they were able to stop the plots of destruction against the Jewish people. I know what coming together can do. When David and his rock and his slingshot and his faith got together, the next morning it read in the paper, the bigger they come, the harder they fall. They tell me that when Shadrach, Meshach, and that bad Negro got together, way down in the fiery furnace, God cooled the furnace down. And somebody said, I see a fourth one in there, and it looks like God's self. I know what coming together can do biblically. When they got together in the upper room, then the Spirit came. When they all got together, regardless of race, creed, or color, and they were on one accord, then God visited them. But I also know it historically, because the truth is, truth and justice has never lost. Now, I didn't say it hadn't been beaten. I didn't say it hadn't been broken, but it's never lost. During slavery, it looked like justice had lost, but then Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and some white Quakers and some white evangelicals got together, and they formed the abolition movement. Women didn't have the right to vote, but then Sojourner Truth and Lucretia Mott and white and black, they got together, and women won the right to vote. Plessy versus Ferguson looked like it had the victory, but when Thurgood Marshall got white lawyers and black lawyers and Jewish lawyers all together, they went before an all-white Supreme Court. One of the members had been a member of the KKK, but when they finished deliberating, all of them voted unanimously to declare that separate but equal was unconstitutional. It looked like Jim Crow had beaten down justice, and justice couldn't rise again, but when Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and Bayard Rustin got together with Glenn Smiley and Jonathan Daniels, who's white, and Viola Liusa and Jim Reed, they tore it down. It looked like apartheid had won. They locked up Nelson Mandela, threw away the key. But when white South Africans and black South Africans all got together, they tore down apartheid. I know it biblically. I know it historically. So you have to understand why they're fighting us. Why certain people don't want to see this. They don't want, give me the hand. They don't want to see it. Give me your, they don't want to see this. They don't want to see us working together and voting together and fighting for health care together and fighting to raise the wages for the poor, because they know when we come together, they know what could happen. They know what could happen. They know we can win. And let me say, not only do I know it biblically, and not only do I know it historically, but I know it personally, because several years ago, about 15 to be exact, some said I'd never walk again. They said I'd never get out of a wheelchair. I was 30-some years old. I'd always depended on my legs, but I woke up one morning and I couldn't move my legs. My legs were in intense pain. I went to the emergency room. They didn't know if it was cancer. They didn't know what was going on. I spent 3 months in a hospital bed, not knowing if I'd ever get up again. For 12 years, I was in a wheelchair and on a walker for 12 years. Whenever I had to preach, I had to walk with my walker, turn it around, stand up, had to go in the bathtub with the walker, had to try to get in the baptism of her. But over those 12 years, something happened. My mind got together, and the prayer warriors got together, and the faith folk got together, and my doctors got together, and my nurses got together, and my pharmacists got together, and my swim coach got together, and I can come up here to Washington Lee tonight and almost run, because when we all got together, And I stopped by to tell you it's time for us to get together. Stop believing the division. Stop believing the lies. Let us get together. Like Dr. King said, nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. And when we all get together, what a day! 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 What a day of rejoicing it will be. Let us stay together. God bless your heart.
Thank you, Dr. Barber. Please join me again in giving him another round of applause. My name is Kraisha Townsend. I'm the Director of Inclusion and Engagement here at Washington and Lee University. At this time, we'll allow for Dr. Barber to take a quick sip of water, and then we'll proceed with a brief Q&A. And so if you see on my left and to my right, there's microphones. So if you have a question for Dr. Barber, please come to those microphones at this time, and we will allow Dr. Barber to answer those questions. So if you have a question, you can come to the microphone now, and we'll have Dr. Barber come join us.
I want to ask you all a question. How many of y'all text moral, is it moral to not, there we go, 99 what? What was the number? Text what? Moral, right? Okay, make sure you do that. Who's got a question? It's a hard crowd. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you, though.
I really appreciate that you included the environment as one of the justice issues, and it's a justice for people of the future, that we're so blessed to live in a resilient, beautiful environment. And I was wanting to know if you would include the threats related to human-caused climate change as among our concerns.
Yeah, you know, you're exactly right. And then if you go to Repairers of the Breach, www. Breach Repairers, or www. Poor People's Campaign, or just type in the souls of poor folk, auditing America 50 years after Poor People's Campaign. You know, one of the worst things you can be, I think, in movement is loud and wrong. So we have some of the best lawyers, economists, statisticians. Before we ever started a new Poor People's Campaign, just like Dr. King, we did an audit. And we audited those 5 areas. And under ecological devastation, there's a whole piece there on climate change and what we believe, and also not just cursing the darkness, but saying what needs to change. Because, you know, right now, one of the reasons, my son's an environmental physicist and a lawyer, and he was telling me, you know, today about these cracks in the ozone and what we're seeing with these Arctic blasts. He actually works with Climate Reality. Former Vice President Al Gore, he's the head of strategic alliances, and they're having a big climate piece. So yes, we are very much concerned about that, because the reality is whatever happens in the climate is going to hurt poor people the worst first. That's that 140 million, the majority of which are white women and children. Now, I say that sometimes, and some of my African Americans say, you keep saying white women and children, why not black? You know, I'm white, black, and Caucasian. I'm white, Native American, Caucasian by DNA, but I'm black if I'm in the wrong side of town and the police stop me. I'm clear about that. I understand that. But my point is, we're trying to deracialize poverty because that was used as a trick. It's not that we walk away. When people ask me, is it race or class, I say it is. You can't understand the American ethos without dealing with the realities of structural racism and structural classism, right? But when it comes to the environment, it's almost akin to something Dr. King said about health. He said of all of the great injustice, healthcare, denial of healthcare was the worst, because if you're sick and not alive, you can't even fight against the racism. Well, we got to step it up if you don't have a planet. Or if the only people that are alive are the people that can pay for the kind of homes that can withstand the heat and whatnot, then what else is there? I mean, as far as we know, this is all we have. I mean, I haven't heard that we can live on Mars and Venus. And if you can, the ticket's gonna be too high. The most of us, not, right? So the reality, this is all we have. So when Dr. King said we either live together or die together, that's true. Not just from the threat of nuclear war, but from the threat of destroying this environment. And it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to be deregulating companies like we're having for greed's sake. And one of the things that bothers me the most about that is when I watch politicians who want to deregulate companies and let them have a free-for-all, knowing that it's going to poison, you know, the environment. I kind of want to ask them, if I could get close to them, you must not even love your own grandchildren. And that's a pretty, you know, and that means something ain't right with you somewhere else. It's not even political. When you will do things in the present that you know is going to have catastrophic impact on your children's children, that's a soul, that's a moral, that's a spirit problem. Something is going haywire. That's why we have to fight laws. We may not ever be able to change the spirit. Dr. King said, I may not ever be able to make people love me, but I want some laws to keep them from lynching me. Right? And that's why we have to fight. And the Bible tells us that from a moral perspective, if God made the earth to care for it, it doesn't mean to destroy it. So my friend, yes, very much so. I would love to see those of you in the environmental arena join the campaign. We're having a big Congress in June called the Poor People's Moral Action Congress, PMAC. And it's going to happen in D.C. We're going to be dealing with all of these issues. We're going to be releasing a budget, a justice budget, because when people say, well, we can't afford it, like just lying. Not only can we afford it, Joseph Stiglitz has written a book. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He's one of my advisors. And Joseph Stiglitz has said the question should be not is what will it cost to deal with inequality, but what is the cost of inequality? And we have a whole budget that we're getting ready to put out by some of the best economists, and they're from all sectors, that are showing us that the right investments in addressing poverty, which can be done. You could end 60% of child poverty right now by simply investing 2% of the federal budget into programs that work. Right now. We are the first generation that are living in a time where it is not ludicrous to say we can fix these things. The question is, do we have the moral will to fix them? And so we're getting ready to push this budget that will show what investment will do and how it will actually double in its return, right? We're putting out an agenda. In 2020, right after the primaries and right before the general election, we're going to have a mass poor people's and poor working people's assembly mass march on Washington, right after the primaries, right before the convention, to drive home these issues. We're not the political left. I'm not people say, are you on the religious left? No. Are you on the religious right? No, because those are not even biblical or orthodox spiritual terms. Those are terms that have been made up. We're talking about the moral center. Let me make this clear to you. When a segregationist chose to try to use Christianity to be a segregationist, they weren't being a conservative Christian. They were being non-Christian. You see what I'm saying? When you try to use the faith to then say, because you're a Christian, you're going to fight against living wages, you're not being a conservative Christian, you're being non-Christian. Because all over the scriptures, the Bible is clear, pay people what they deserve. Old and New Testament. So we're not on the left or the right. Those are political terms. We're talking about recapturing the moral center. And by the way, lastly, my friend, you know, we're trying to teach people this stuff, it's not like it's new. Like, Obama didn't really come up with health care. I say that because people, I keep wondering, Mr. President, why do Republicans fight health care when it came from a Republican? It was Teddy Roosevelt. In 1912, read his bull speech. Why do Republicans, or extremists, not necessarily Republicans, my granddad was a Republican, or so-called conservative Democrat, I don't know what all these terms mean, why do they fight regulation of companies when it was Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 that said taking care of the environment was a moral issue? Some things are just not about Democrat and Republican and left versus right. It's really about right versus wrong. And we have to reclaim that. When the women's suffrage movement fought for women right to vote, they didn't say they were on the left. When the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King never said the civil rights movement was on the left, on the right. He talked about the moral arc of the universe that bends toward justice. So my friend, I say all of that to say there are 5 interlocking injustices that we're naming: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We're saying they are interlocking injustices. You can't separate one without the other. You got to deal with them all. You can't deal with one in a silo. And in order to do that, all of us must bring our different areas together. We must have an intersectional moral fusion movement that comes together to address these issues, right? Because one is connected to the other. Most of the people that vote for voter suppression also vote against the environment. Same people that vote against the environment also vote many times against public education. You see what I'm saying? If you check the records. So we often say if they are cynical enough to be together, we've got to be smart and loving and truthful enough to come together. Is there another? I was a little long. Uh-oh. That lady right there. Yes.
I see that some states are moving in the direction of voting rights. What do you see is going to happen in your state of North Carolina?
Well, none of them are moving without being forced to move. It's kind of, they ain't moving because they want to move. They're moving because we're suing. They're moving because we started winning in the courts. But now, you know, with this new this stolen seat on the Supreme Court, you know, in the lower courts we're winning, but now we also have a president. All these tweets are distractions, because what's really going on is the whole revamping of our federal judiciary system. I mean, he literally tried to put on the federal bench in North Carolina a man who is a known white supremacist. I mean, just known, not even quiet about it, and who had worked on every voter suppression case since Jesse Helms. This president tried to appoint him to the federal bench. We were able to get Tim Scott to stand against him, which was the one vote. Here's the reality, though. Ever since Section 5 pre-clearance was gutted, every state legislature that has a bunch of extremists in it have sought to suppress the vote. And here's the reason why. Extremists cannot win if everybody votes. They cannot win. Even in this last election, it was not, and they didn't win. It was a select 4 million votes were for the other candidate. And I'm not suggesting I'm not pushing a candidate, I'm talking the facts. So extremism always wants to suppress the vote, right? And come up, but they want to do it making you think they're protecting voter integrity. What we have to do in North Carolina, we won after all of those arrests and all those protests and all those cases. We won against our voter suppression. And then they turned right around this last year and voted back into they're trying to put now in the Constitution some things that the Supreme Court overruled. So we're headed back to court again. I mean, it's like, you know, they just don't quit like roaches, you know, just keep, just keep right on. I mean, literally lost unanimously in the courts and then turned around this past election, before the end of the year, called a one-day special session and said, we're gonna put it back in the Constitution, so we're headed back to court again. We have to be vigilant. But we also have to register people for the movement who vote, because we have to, while we're fighting voter suppression, we have to overwhelm people at the ballot. Now let me show you what I mean real quickly, because I know we've got to move. 100 million people didn't vote. Now part of the reason they didn't vote because we had 26 presidential debates and not one of them on poverty, not one of them on racism. So people aren't hearing their issues, so they're tuning out. So we got to change the narrative of our politics. If we keep talking only about the middle class and the wealthy, that's dismissing 43.5% of the people. They don't hear themselves. But Trump won, for instance, in Michigan by 10,000 votes. 100,000 African Americans alone in Detroit didn't vote, right? Now, my white brothers and sisters, don't say, but black folks should vote. Y'all ain't doing no better. White folks staying home too. I mean, that's my point. Too many folks staying home. And you got to remember that the goal of the extremists, the first goal is to lock up Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Maryland, and Tennessee. And Texas, the southern states. Why? Because if you can control the 13 former Confederate states, you control 171 electoral votes, which means you only need 99 from the other 37 states. If you control the 13 southern states, you control 26 members of the United States Senate, which means you only need 25 from the other 37 states. You control 30% of the United States House of Representatives, which means you only need 21% from the other 37 states. And you control 13 state houses, and state houses control voting laws. So ever since 1968 with the white Southern strategy, the goal was to control these 13 states so that the states with the least amount of population control the nation. Now, the only way you can control that, though, is you gotta keep black and white and brown people divided. Because the demographics now tell us that if you register 30% of the black voters in the southern states and they connect with progressive whites and they connect with progressive Latinos, then that's a new voting bloc that the extremists can't overwhelm. That's why you're seeing what happened in Alabama and what happened in Georgia and what happened in Florida. Though they stopped Stacey and Andrew, but you had to, what's happening is there's a new South, and the extremists know it. So they sow all of this divisive stuff, you know. Somebody's trying to raise your taxes. They're not raising your taxes. You know, somebody, if you get all this health care, it's gonna cost you. Really, the code words behind that is them. And they are your problem. Like Dr. King said, they don't want poor whites and poor blacks and working class whites and working class blacks and Latinos and Asians and natives to come together. Because if that happens, then 4 states change automatically. Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, they change automatically. And if just 2 of them change, the whole political map change. If voting is not suppressed, 4 of them change automatically. And with a little work, Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi change. So we are in the beginning stages of a third Reconstruction. You hear what I said? That's why it's time for us to stop whining and go to work. Huh? And start organizing and registering people to vote. I'm not even talking about what party. Just get involved, right? You don't have to vote party, vote issues, right? But it's time. Yes, ma'am, real quick. We got one more. Yeah. Well, I will say it like this. Truth is a hard thing, and America is built on a lot of mythology. You know, sometimes, y'all gonna get mad at me, but I just don't blame Trump for everything. You know, because folk been lying a long time. He just does it extra special. I mean, but it's not, and I'm not being facetious about your question, but, you know, Reagan lied, trickle down. I mean, you know, Obama didn't always tell the whole truth. But the difference, what we have now, is the recklessness, right? But it's not, but remember now, to really deal with America, you've got to be willing to deal with some ugly truth that we don't even like to tell. I mean, even on this campus. You know, most folk just want to go forward. That's why we never heal stuff, because we don't deal with it. You know, so we set ourselves up to believe lies. And so these myths, the myths of racism and classism, can work powerful magic, right, that can conjure up. What Trump is calling forth was already there. And it wasn't underneath either. And he's not doing it by himself. The Congress people are just as much liars as him because they're going along with it. My concern is not so much the people who are lying, but the people who refuse to tell the truth. And refuse to tell the truth. Like, I mean, I get on Democrats all the time who won't even say the word poor. You know, they talk about the middle class, you know. At some point, we have got to tell some truth. I remember when the Affordable Care Act was passed, there were a group of us that begged, said, President Obama, come south. And most in the administration that I know of never really came to the rural South and showed people how this act was going to really impact poor white people. They almost allowed it to be racialized. I remember when they called it Obamacare, and I remember the day he said, okay, if you want to call Obamacare, let's call it. I said, no, don't call it that. And don't agree with that, because that's a trick. Right? Right. So with the corporate media, and the corporate media seems to like the liars. You know, they just keep putting them on, and it's hard to question them. You know, think about all the free media that Trump got, you know. But hopefully in this season, what's happening is, you know, after a while, a lie becomes so bitter, you got to come to the truth. And what I'm saying it to people, and I think Dr. King would say, is that it ain't just about one person. There's some social and some lies in our history and in our society that we have to face. It's not just one individual. He was gone tomorrow. I mean, that doesn't solve the problem. What's going to happen is we're going to have to tell some of the truths like I told tonight. Like, for instance, most of you in here have heard for the last few years how many poor people are in this country. What lie have you heard? 39 to 40 million. We the people, with our research, are going to say, no, it's 140 million. You see what I'm saying? That's why we got to have a movement. Only movements produce a more truthful society. Politicians alone have never done it. It's always required a movement of the people to push the society to be a little bit more of a perfect, more truthful nation. So the Poor People's Campaign, one of our central things is to try to tell the truth. That's why when they told me, they said, you can't go to Harlan County, Kentucky. I said, why? Because that's their country. I said, but aren't they human beings just like everybody? Well, you can't go up there. We went up there. And 400 or 500 people joined, all mostly white. And we talked the same stuff I talked tonight. I talked there. I showed them how the very people that are suppressing the votes and then telling them to vote for them because they're against gay people and against women's right to choose, pull their whole record. Those same people voted against you in the coal mines, voted against your health care. And people eyes start opening up and said, I didn't know that. And we said, no. You know, there are some people, be quite honest, said to me, you really not going to election in Virginia. I mean, they did, Brother President. They said, you at night? And they said, and you gonna say what you've been saying? I said, yeah, because I believe God's got some people everywhere. Huh? I believe God's got some instruments of love and justice and truth everywhere. And so, my sister, I think the best thing we can do is join somewhere. I'm inviting you to join this campaign across this country. We got 41 coordinating committees now in 40 states. We launched this campaign for 6 weeks last Mother's Day, ended in June. 5,000 people got arrested in 40 states simultaneously every Monday for 6 weeks. 37 million people follow us on Twitter, over 1 million people. People are ready for a movement. 25,000 people showed up of every race, creed, and color on June 23rd of 2018 to say that we are going to finish the Poor People's Campaign. We're going to reach down in the blood and pick up the baton. I'm calling on you and these students. I want to see Washington Lee in that big march in 2020. I want us to stand together, because ultimately, if enough of us tell the truth, the lie will taste like vomit and people will throw it up.
Wow. Thank you all for coming out tonight and battling the cold weather and for celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. King, and to hear from the powerful words of Dr. William Barber II. For the past 2 weeks, our campus and the greater Lexington and Rockbridge communities have had the opportunity to indulge in programming that celebrates both social justice and King's ideal of being a part of a beloved community. This year's theme was Dr. King's vision, humanity tied in a single garment of destiny, which served as a continuous reminder of how we're not in this world alone and are very much tied to one another's successes, or as you just heard tonight, failures. In Dr. Barber's talk tonight, he reminded us to be engaged. He reminds us of King's words, be concerned about your brother because we either go up together or go down together. Reverend Barber urges us to move beyond the hoop because nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. So thank you again for serving as our keynote speaker and helping us see where we are tied in this single garment of destiny, and that we need to pick up the baton. Now, I would be remiss if I did not take this opportunity to thank all the dedicated people that played a part in making not only tonight, but the last 2 weeks possible. I've had the pleasure of working with the students that you saw tonight, as well as many others that have contributed to Washington and Lee's commitment to excellence and inclusion. So in closing, I wanted to say a special thank you to the following folks: our university president, William Dudley, the VP of Student Affairs and Dean of Students, Sydney Evans, our Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Student Engagement, Tammy Futrell, our student MCs, who did an excellent job. Thank you, Naria and John Tay. To the students who shared their talent with us through dance and song tonight, Runa, Carissa, Lauren, Levi, Ramona, Sasha, Joelle, and Joy and Timmy. To my fellow MLK 2019 Planning Committee, please stand to be recognized if you're here. Mark Connor, Marilyn Alexander, Michael Hill, Howard Pickett, Tammy Simpson, Wendy Rice, Jamie Gooden, Kelsey Goodwin, Trinae Mason, Naria Shahadat, Brianna Mondesir, and Michael Wilson. Give them a round of applause. I'd also like to thank the entire communications department for their work in spreading the word about all 11 events that we had over the last 2 weeks in their beautiful publications. So you all got to see a little bit of their handiwork here in the logo for tonight's event. To my OIE student staff, Ayo, Anuma, Kushali, and Anna, thank you. And thank you to our undergraduate students, law school students, and staff that participated in yesterday's service projects that spanned from Rockbridge, Lexington, and Roanoke. And I saw a couple of folks here in the audience. Hey, how you doing, Grayson? And to the catering staff for making all of our events, from cookies and punch to the reflection dinner, a true culinary delight. Thank you. A huge thank you to the LinFest staff, John, Rob, Brad, and Jeremy for helping us make tonight a seamless event. And to you all as audience members, thank you for coming tonight. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna change it up a little bit. We're gonna have join Dr. Barber in the Cayman Gallery for a light reception. However, if you bought a book, we're gonna do book signing from the stage. So if you bought a book and you would like it to be signed, Dr. Barber will be here, and you can come up on this side of the stairs and then you can exit on that side of the stairs. We're asking that you come up one at a time so that we can keep it orderly and process very quickly. So thank you again for tonight. Thank you, and have a good evening, safe travels. Good night.